And one last look at your traffic and weather for your ride in on this Friday morning. And I am happy to report still no accidents out on the roadway as of right now. I actually got in pretty quickly myself on my drive in just a little bit earlier. A slight bit warmer today. The high is going to get up to 48, 52 tomorrow, then a nice balmy 58 on Sunday as we slowly work our way out of this cold snap that we've dealt with this entire week. That's look at your traffic and weather on your Friday here in the early game. Nine o'clock on your Friday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you here on the game. I'm excited, as I just said. It's going to get up to 58 degrees on Sunday. Gosh, it's going to feel like summertime compared to what we've dealt with this entire week.
Yeah, it's I was looking yesterday, man. It said it was 60. It's going to be in the 60s next week.
Something like that. I think it's going to hit like 67 on like Wednesday or something, maybe.
I mean, that's crazy. I mean, it's crazy. But do you just want to hear some breaking news right out of the gate?
Oh yes, please. We love breaking news.
The Board of Trustees met this morning,
yep,
and they approved an athletics contract for head coach Shane Beamer.
Okay.
And he's got a new contract. It'll run through 2030, and he will earn $8,150,000 with a $100K bump up in pay.
Boom.
Every year. So
okay,
that's some big news right there.
Great way to start off the. I saw the email about the Board of Trustees meeting. I didn't know exactly which athletic contract that was pertaining to. And look, those things can be, assistant coaches on the baseball team sometimes. Those kind of things like that doesn't always mean it's going to be one of the big ones. But, man, that's a big one. And, just coming in right now, I'm looking to see, as far as head coach salaries across college football, where that would put him. You said $8 million a year, correct?
Yeah, so, I don't know what I guess would be 8.1 million.
8.1 million.
And it's gonna go up by $100K every year. So it could by 2030. That's 5 seasons from now. It could end up being 8.6 million.
So I'm looking at this list that was compiled back in October. Now we do have to include Bill Belichick in this list because he, by the way, signed his contract with North Carolina yesterday, valued at $10 million a year. So he's out of this list as well. If I'm looking at this correctly, and I don't know of any of these other coaches that have had contracts restructured since then, that would put him like top 15. So Brent Venables at Oklahoma is currently making 8.1 per season out there. Obviously, Coach Beamer's had a lot more success in his 4 years now than Venables has had in his time at Oklahoma. So, yeah, he's now right there about the top 15 if he's making 8.1 mil per year.
Yeah, look, it's totally warranted and totally earned for sure. I mean, he had a great season for South Carolina this year, and the progress they've made from you look back at 2023, winning 5 games, and even in his first 2 years, I mean, it's hard to forget that. Or easy to forget, I should say, at South Carolina. I mean, the expectations for year one back in 2021, I mean, it feels like so long ago, but it's like, the expectations were not to, 7 wins in a season. I mean, he definitely exceeded expectations in year one, and then to beat Clemson and to beat Tennessee in year 2, get to 8 wins, and then last year, with 5 and 7, and then, this past year, 9 wins. I mean, that's definitely warranted to give him an extension here.
Outside of the 2023 season, where of course he went 5 and 7 and missed a bowl game and all that stuff, it's been a steady step forward, and I've said this before in a weird way now that we can add the fourth season of 2024 in there, he kind of did things out of order a little bit, right? To where, look, year number one, nobody expected anything. Coach Beamer was taking over a program that was pretty far down in the SEC, and what their projected win total was like 2 wins in 2021. Not only did they go out there and go 6-6, which already exceeds expectations, they win the bowl game as well. So you have a 7-6 year for a guy that had never been a head coach before, that was in a program that was trending towards the bottom of the SEC, really overachieved in year number one. And I know they were sitting in position to potentially be 6-6 again, in early November of 2022. And then they go out there and pull off 2 of the biggest wins at the time in program history against Tennessee and Clemson in back-to-back weeks, obviously in both those teams' playoff chances at that time. And again, you overachieved. You won 8 games in a year that nobody expected you to do that. Again, year number 3 was a step back, 5-7. Nobody's denying that. But year 4, we talked about it all summer. The win projections were 5-6 wins. You'd be lucky to make a bowl game. Oh, Carolina's going to miss a bowl game for the second year in a row. And they won 9 freaking games, went to the Citrus Bowl, and yeah, you didn't win that game and get that coveted 10th win, but nevertheless, you were one of the hottest teams in college football to wrap up the season. You were just on the outside looking in when it came to the college football playoff. The Beamer tenure at South Carolina has been about exceeding expectations almost every single year. And again, I'm already looking at projections of win totals and stuff for next year that are a little bit low, and there's a lot of turnover on this team, certainly, and things that have to, be reassured as the offseason goes along, but there's no reason to think they can't overachieve in 2025 as well.
No, totally. Like this, you're not making this move if you're not confident in the fact of, okay, South Carolina, we've talked about it many times. This should not be a 1-year thing where, okay, this team was really good this year and that's it. And they'll kind of go back to being mediocrity again, being, hovering around 6 wins and stuff. Kind of like what the projections had them with the 6.5 win total from Vegas. This should signal that South Carolina isn't going anywhere for the time being. Like, as long as Beamer's around, they should be in contention for a playoff spot, just like they were this year. And that's it's good. It's good to see that he's going to get his money here. He'll get paid. Obviously, all his assistant coaches got contracts. This past month, back in December. So it's good. It's good to see that all the staff has been taken care of. Now Beamer too, and yeah, I mean, again, you wouldn't be making this move if you weren't like absolutely confident in the fact of, yeah, he had a great season, but he's going to keep doing this moving forward.
And one thing that stands out to me about Beamer is he really wants to be here. You know what I mean? And, when you look at him taking the job back in 2020, and Wes and I, talked about this yesterday when we were kind of retrospectively looking back on how people felt about Beamer when the hire was made. And there were some people that were critical. Okay, he's never been an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, doesn't have, head coaching experience. How's this going to translate? And, did he get the job just because they really, really wanted the job and they didn't have any other option, which that's obviously not the case. But Beamer's not been shy about how much he loves Columbia, how much he loves being a part of this. Obviously, he'd been here prior, on the Spurrier staff and was excited to come back. But one thing that he does really well is he embraces it. He's ingrained in this community. And look, I wasn't working here when Will Muschamp was here, but even as an outsider to the Carolina program at that point in time, I could tell Will Muschamp was not ingrained in Columbia. He was not embracing this fan base and this city and this community the way that Shane Beamer does. And that's what people here locally really want out of their coaches. We talked about this last year when Coach Kingston was fired, is like he just never really seemed like he fit in with what the Columbia, Carolina crowd is. You didn't see him at other sporting events. Didn't talk about how much he loved the city and, going out and doing things within the community. And Beamer does. I mean, God, Beamer's at every sporting event there is. And really kind of, you can tell he enjoys being here. And you're not afraid he's using this as a stepping stone to say, oh, well, if the Oklahoma job came open, he's going to go take that or something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many good stories about how Beamer is involved in the community and stuff. And you bring up, Kingston and stuff like that. And Muschamp, look, it's, Shane is definitely one of one when it comes to that stuff. And, there's so many good examples. I mean, like, whenever, I can't remember their names, but, like, whenever the team bus goes to the stadium and they've got those fans that are waiting on the the corner streets or whatever.
Yep.
Like, they'll stop and stuff. That's always cool. I mean, shout out Miss Kathy from CVS and stuff with Shane basically converting a Clemson fan to a Beamer lover and stuff. It's just stuff like that you don't hear about with every single college football coach, because it's becoming more and more of a business now compared to what it really used to be. But Shane is definitely a guy who wears his heart on his sleeve. I mean, he's great for South Carolina, and South Carolina is definitely fortunate to have a guy like this as their head coach.
Yeah, and again, that contract now runs through December 31st of 2030. And like you mentioned, for this calendar year, it's going to be $8.1 million annually. That escalates all the way up to $8.6 million by 2030. So, yeah, $100,000 increase every single year going forward. And again, when you look at what he's accomplished so far, and this is something we brought up a couple times towards the end of the regular season, he has eclipsed the 4-year win total that was set by Steve Spurrier, who, again, was the most successful coach in the first 4 years in Carolina history. Now that belongs to Shane Beamer, and again, is being compensated rightfully so along that. And again, based on my estimation here, that should put him about top 15 in college football in terms of head coaches' salaries.
And not just top 15 in college football. And I'm looking at some numbers here. And a lot of the SEC is in those top 15 rankings. And again, I'm looking at a story that is, from 2024. So this could have maybe changed during the offseason here a little bit, like it has with Shane Beamer now. But the point is, Beamer's much more in line now with what SEC top coaches are getting paid. Like, for instance, Kirby Smart's making $13 million, and that's totally warranted. The guy is an absolute, legendary head coach, I think, at this point. But the other ones that I think he's much more on par with here, like Eli Drinkwitz, for example, at Missouri,
Yep.
making $9 million. Josh Heupel, $9 million. Lane Kiffin, $9 million. Brett Venables, $8.15 million. So
Mark Stoops, $9 million, which is still funny to me.
Yeah, well, Kentucky's got that's a Kentucky problem. They got the basketball money. They'll be all right.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, times are tough for Kentucky right now, losing a basketball potential commit to UNC too. So, look, Beamer's much more in line with what SEC coaches are getting paid, and that's a good thing because his salary was obviously increased a good bit here, and yeah, I mean, look, it's definitely well deserved for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, breaking news of the morning right off the jump here at 9 o'clock. Coach Beamer does get a contract extension and a salary increase where he'll be making $8.1 million in 2025, $100,000 escalators each and every year through 2030. They'll get him up to 8.6 by that point in time. We'll continue to touch on this as the rest of the morning goes along. But coming up next, dive back into some basketball. Men's team, can they finally get a win? Sitting at 0-6 in conference play as they take on Mississippi State for the second time this month. Coming up tomorrow, we'll dive into that and see if we can script exactly how this game is going to go based on what we've seen these past couple of games. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you on your Friday here on The Game. Tyler right here once again telling you about our friends over at Twin Peaks. Do you consider yourself a bourbon connoisseur? Well, at Twin Peaks, they are proud to often offer an exclusive and extensive collection of some incredibly rare bourbons, whiskeys, and tequilas. Plus, you can also check out their barrel selects that are handpicked by their team and bottled just for you. But it doesn't stop at just bourbon. Of course, they have any kind of drink and spirit that you can imagine you can take in with their amazing food while you're watching all that great sports action or whatever your heart's desire on those amazing TVs that are as far as the eye can see. Again, never a bad time to get down to Twin Peaks, right down the street from us here in Columbia in the Vista, especially with so much great sports action going on. Get out to Twin Peaks in the Vista as soon as you can. Well, welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyrett and Jack Belcher along with you here on your Friday on the game. Big matchup tonight over at Colonial Life Arena. Women's basketball, top 5 showdown. South Carolina playing host to LSU. Of course, this game was supposed to take place last night due to the weather making its way through the southeast, delaying LSU a day. So that matchup taking place tonight instead. 5 o'clock tip, pregame coverage starting at 4:30 here on the game as the Gamecock women look to remain undefeated in conference play, taking on a team in LSU that is yet to have a blemish on the resume at all this year and fight for supremacy in the SEC.
Yeah, it's going to be a great matchup tonight. I'm really looking forward to it. I wish this game was yesterday because my plan was to be out there and stuff, but we got baseball today and stuff, so it all gets a little convoluted now. But Yeah, I'm really, really thinking this is going to be. I think I've said it all week. I think this is going to be game of the year for women's college basketball.
It is the game that I think appeals to casual sports fans, right?
Yeah.
The past couple years, and look, Mulkey and Staley are two huge personalities. Obviously, both have had great success, national championships, all that kind of stuff. But, and I think considering the fact that the last time these two played at the SEC tournament, things got crazy, and was it Flau'jae Johnson's brother got out on the court and got arrested, and all hell broke loose in that game. Like, there is so much intrigue around this game anytime these two teams get together, because again, it's going to be a high level matchup. You're going to be looking at two of the best rosters in women's college basketball, and when you're talking about which team's going to claim the SEC regular season crown, this game's going to go a long way in determining that.
No, yeah, I mean, this is the game. Like, again, we thought maybe Texas, South Carolina would be that game, and it still could be at some point. Texas is a little bit behind the standings here, but I mean, you said it. I mean, LSU's undefeated right now, and South Carolina only has that one loss. But I mean, look, both teams are undefeated in SEC play so far, and it's a great early test for both these teams, especially LSU, who really hasn't been as battle tested as South Carolina.
On the flip side of things, the men's team still looking for that first win in SEC play, as they'll get set to take on Mississippi State coming up tomorrow. Obviously, they started off conference play on the road in Starkville. That Jack, you were in attendance for this one. 35-point loss, and it didn't really even feel that close. And you hope that's a different story coming up tomorrow. But again, as we've seen game in and game out, they've done a lot of things good, but they just cannot seem to close the deal against anyone.
Yeah, I'm glad they don't have to go back to Starkville for tomorrow. That would have been. I don't know if I'd be wanting to make that trip, honestly. But yeah, it's. The South Carolina is going through a really, really tough stretch. 0-6 to start conference play. You lose tomorrow. You've now set the mark for your worst start in program history for the SEC slate if you were to go 0-7. Mississippi State's a good team. However, I've seen, this is not the same team, I don't think, like maybe from like a player standpoint and all that, but it's not the same team that you faced back in Starkville earlier this month. And that's incredible to say for South Carolina, because Mississippi State's lost 3 of their last 4.
Yep.
They've proven to be a lot more vulnerable. And I think Carolina being at home, it really does benefit them, to be honest, because you went to Starkville, you had your worst first half of the year. I mean, look, you're not going to have a first half every game where it's 18 points and you're shooting less than 30% from the field for the game, and your best player isn't doing anything and having more turnovers than points. That's not going to happen every game. And the fact that this is at home, South Carolina benefits from a good home crowd. You might hopefully get Jamari Thomas back tomorrow, which would make a huge difference. And I think South Carolina can definitely go out here and make this a game. And if it's a close game, it really comes down to a number of things, meaning Carolina can't get in its own way of winning. You can't be turning the ball over like crazy. You know Mississippi State's going to bring aggression and pressure. You got to be ready for it, and you can't make mistakes when it matters most.
I thought this would be kind of a fun way to look at this because, again, Carolina still searching for that first win in SEC play, and the last 3 games have been pretty similar with the losses to, or the last handful of games have been pretty similar with the losses to Auburn, Vanderbilt, and most recently, what you had the other night with Florida. So I wanted to see if we could write the script for how this game is going to go tomorrow and see if it ends up with the same kind of result. So I think the biggest question, the question to start off with is, okay, what kind of start does Carolina get off to? Again, that game against Mississippi State earlier on this year, that first half was a complete disaster. You went into halftime trailing 43-18. You shot 23% from the field. Meanwhile, Mississippi State couldn't seem to miss. They were 51% with their shots. And again, we've seen against teams like Auburn, against teams like Florida the other day, Carolina has the ability to get off to fast starts. So what are we predicting for tomorrow?
I don't know. I think this is going to be a closer game. I refuse to believe South Carolina is going to have that type of game again where they just, I mean, seriously, dude, I think that was the worst basketball game.
Oh, you knew it was over before you even got to halftime, which is the part that sucks.
It was over within the first, literally as soon as Josh Hubbard hit back-to-back threes, it was like 8-2. I'm like, yeah, this game's over. Like, this team is definitely not going to be ready for what's to come today. And, yeah, I mean, look, I just don't think that's going to happen again. I think this is going to be a much closer game. I do think it is going to come down to the wire. And I think something's going to happen to where South Carolina's going to be in it to win it. But, again, just like the last few games, something's going to go wrong where they get in their own way, trip over themselves, and Mississippi State runs to the finish line and wins, no problem.
So the first time they played against Mississippi State, you mentioned Colin Murray-Boyles, did not have a good game, only 5 total points in that matchup. He struggled out of the gate in the first 2 conference games, and it seems to be a consistent issue for Carolina that at least one of their starters has a very glaringly bad stat line to some degree. Colin Murray-Boyles had that bad game against Mississippi State in game number 1. Most recently, of course, the other night you had Zach Davis, who scored 22 points but just could not stop turning the ball over. Nick Pringle's been bad shooting from the free throw line. So what starter is potentially running into a big problem coming up tomorrow?
It's a good question. Good question. I think you hope Jacoby Wright can have a better game. You really hope he can have a better game because he really turned the ball over a lot. And I think he's going to be, I don't know. He's struggled lately, and if Jamari's not playing tomorrow, I could kind of see that continuing, to be honest. And I don't know. That's kind of my gut feel on this, though it wouldn't surprise me if Zach or Nick misses like a big free throw or something. That's kind of just the way it's been over this losing streak.
And, of course, the free throws and the turnovers have been a consistent problem for the Gamecocks, especially in SEC play. So which of those fundamentals could potentially come back to hurt them the most tomorrow?
The turnovers, easy. I think that's an easy one because Mississippi State turns you over a lot, and they definitely did back in Starkville on the 4th. And South Carolina just, again, if Mississippi State runs that aggressive trap defense they ran, which really affected CMB and thus affected the rest of the team, it is going to be a long afternoon. If Mississippi State has their way and they get the turnovers and they just force South Carolina to make bad passes and make mistakes, this game could be early or over pretty early on, just like it was back then.
I'm personally worried about the free throws. When they played them the first time a couple weeks ago, Carolina was 16 of 23 from the free throw line. That's just under 70%. And this is a team in Mississippi State that does allow opponents to get to the line at a fairly decent clip. So you're going to have seemingly plenty of opportunities because, again, they play very aggressive defense under Chris Jans. And look, I have a lot of confidence that Carolina can make this a tight game, just on what we've seen when they play at home. And again, playing at home in the SEC is a big advantage. And again, this is another top 15 team that you're getting in Colonial Life Arena, where I think this is going to be a tight game. But my worry comes down to, okay, you're down by a point, maybe you're leading by a point or two like it was the other night, and you're missing key free throws in those final 4 to 5 minutes of the game that when we come in on Monday, we're saying, yep, that's where it went sideways because you couldn't make those free throws when you needed to.
You know what the funny thing is going to be? If they find a way to lose this game, it'll probably be a combination of all these things we just talked about and not just one thing. Like, this could easily be a game where South Carolina turns the ball over 15 times and they miss a handful of free throws. It just feels like there's so many things that go wrong for this team. It's like, it's not one thing. And it's like, if they clean that one thing up,
sure.
It's like the free throws, for instance. If they close that up, they're good. They're fine. But it's so many other things you have to worry about to where it's like, oh, man, like this team's got a load of issues. And that's what happens when you're on a 6-game losing streak.
And that's the thing is I don't want to have to be negative, but when you're seeing the same things happen game after game after game, it really becomes almost a fill-in-the-blank type of thing when it comes to, okay, what starter's going to struggle in this game? What fundamental issue are they going to have that's going to end up costing them? How close are they going to be to winning this game, but it falls through their fingers? How long are they going to lead for before giving up in the final couple minutes? Like those kind of things that you see over and over and over again almost become expected to a point.
Yeah, it's the makeup of a team that has a lot of issues. In South Carolina, during this stretch here at 10-9 now, they definitely have a lot of issues, and they got to get figured out. We say that every single day, honestly, at this point. But there comes a point where it's like, are they going to get it figured out? I think these next few games here, starting tomorrow, really tell you where this team's at from a mental standpoint and confidence standpoint.
Yeah, it doesn't get any easier. Of course, the SEC is tough. From bottom to top, you go to Georgia coming up on Tuesday. Got a home game against A&M. Then you're going up to Rupp Arena, taking on Kentucky coming up at the beginning of February as well. So there's no let up, and you got to find a way to get a win at some point. Maybe it'll be Mississippi State tomorrow. We'll have to see what happens. That game tips off at 1 o'clock. Pregame coverage starting at 12:30 here on the game. By the way, the new transfer portal football players are going to be introduced at this game. You'll be able to get some autographs from those guys. Hear from Coach Beamer, I believe, at halftime of that game as well. So if you don't want to go to see the basketball game, you can at least go to see the new transfers.
Yep. That'll be great. And, get there early and, be ready at halftime.
Speaking of football, it is a big weekend in the NFL Conference Championship games. We'll dive into some of those coming up next as the Extra Point rolls along. Tyler Head, Jack Beltry on your Friday here on the game.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Are you tired of the freezing cold and ready for the Columbia heat to be back? Well, it's going to warm up a little bit next week, but still, it's going to be a little bit cold. That's why you should call AAA. Here's some great news. You can buy a new unit today, and there's no payments or interest for 12 months. Unbelievable. There's pricing transparency, no hidden charges or fees, $1,500 buyback instant rebate, 15 years parts and labor transferable warranty. There's also 0% interest for qualified buyers, guaranteed financing as well. So you can call AAA like I did at 803-677-1500. Again, that is 803-677-1500. You can tell them that you heard about AAA on 107.5 The Game.
Yeah, listen, it normally doesn't hurt, for sure. I don't know how you weigh out the advantage of it, but I feel like we play these guys all the time, so they know us, we know them. But I'm glad, to answer your question, I'm glad we have all those guys, and you'll need all of them. So.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you here on your Friday on the Game. That, of course, is the voice of Chiefs head coach Andy Reid talking about the familiarity of the Buffalo Bills. Jack, it almost feels like these two teams are divisional rivals with how much they see each other, whether it be in the regular season or the playoffs, as for the fourth time in the Allen Mahomes saga, they will square off in the playoffs. And fortunately for you, the Chiefs have gotten the better of that the other three times.
I still haven't gotten over the second game in that. Honestly, all these games, honestly. The first year was the Bills had the lead early, and then it's like, yeah, all right, the Chiefs won, no problem. Sure. That was the first year of this thing. Year two, the Bills should have won that game. I can't get over the 13 seconds thing. That was.
Is there a frame of time that makes the skin crawl of a Bills fan more than 13 seconds?
Wide right.
Okay, that also hurts.
Wide right, which last year, too, was Tyler Rasmussen.
Which is a callback to
Scott Norwood.
Scott Norwood back in whichever Super Bowl that was.
It was against the Giants, that Super Bowl, where he missed the kick. That, it just makes your skin crawl. But yeah, look, a new opportunity, a new day, and the one thing you can always have is hope, and that's what you need as a Bills fan.
This feels like the year, right? If it's going to happen, if Josh Allen is finally going to get to a Super Bowl, if Sean McDermott's finally going to beat Andy Reid in the postseason, this feels like the year it can happen.
I said the same thing last year because, number one, I said if it's at home for the Bills last year, if they can't win at home, it's never going to happen. I still remember saying that, and, of course, it didn't happen. And I was like, all right, it's never going to happen. They can never beat this team. We will see if I'm proved wrong on Sunday. I feel better about this game compared to when the Bills played the Ravens, and that was at home. But the thing is, Patrick Mahomes, for as good of a quarterback as he is, he's not Lamar Jackson. He's not you don't have to worry. I mean, he's going to run when he can, but you don't have to worry about the possibility of him running for 30 yards every single play. And they also don't have Derrick Henry lined up in the backfield.
Well, that's what I was going to say is the Chiefs don't really have that great of a running game. They are truly a pass-happy team, and even their passing offense this year specifically is nothing compared to what it's been in years past. Like, they're very limited on offense this season, and again, they have a very good defense. Chris Jones, Hall of Famer, coming off the edge and all that kind of stuff. But if Buffalo, and again, Buffalo won the regular season matchup 30-21, that's the only legitimate loss I give the Chiefs all year, because I don't count what happened last game in the regular season where none of their starters end up playing. So the Bills are the only team that found the blueprint on how to beat the Chiefs, and the big part of that was making sure it wasn't a one-score game at the very end, because the Chiefs have found a million ways to win these tight one-score games, and the Bills did not allow them to have the opportunity to have the ball with a minute or two left and only being down one score.
If you can score in the range of where you scored against the Ravens with 27 points, I think that's going to be enough to win this game, because like you said, I don't want to underestimate the Chiefs, because that is the worst thing you could do as any sports fan. You can never count that team out, ever, ever, ever. But the Chiefs don't have that same firepower, I don't think, as the Bills have. And the Bills, look, that Ravens game, I saw a different Bills team. In years past, even going up against the Chiefs, or when they went up against the Ravens a few years ago, this would be a team that turns the ball over a few times. They make mistakes, but they're explosive on offense. Basically like what you saw at the Ravens the other night. This Bills team was much more conscious of what they're doing. They're not one-dimensional. Joe Brady's done a great job this year. And the Bills have a good run game. They obviously have Josh, who can run a bit. And I think they have good weapons to where they spread the ball around. It's not Stephon Diggs and everyone else. It's Khalil Shakir, Mac Hollins, Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox. It's so many different guys getting involved in the offense. So I think that benefits the Bills. At the same time, never count out Mahomes, never count out Kelsey. The Chiefs are still the Chiefs.
That's the thing to me is all the numbers, all the metrics, what the football that I've watched of both teams this year tell me that Buffalo should win this game. But there's just something about Kansas City in the playoffs. When you got 15 on your team, you're always going to have a chance. And he's not done the same amount of dazzling Mahomes magic this year that he's done in years past. But if there was ever a time to break it out, the AFC Championship game seems like that perfect time. So again, my gut says go with the Bills, but man, it's so hard to bet against the Chiefs because they've done it again and again and again and again for what's been a not great year overall in terms of the personnel that they have and the success they've had, particularly on offense. They've found a way to win 15 games, now 16 when you count the win over the Texans this past weekend.
The real thing I worry about from the standpoint of the Bills defense going up against the Chiefs, I think they can stop them, but you're dealing with some injuries right now because you got kind of banged up in that Ravens game where you have 4 guys questionable right now on your defense that are quite critical to your success with Matt Milano, Christian Benford, Taron Johnson, and Taylor Rapp. And I think they're going to get – I would hope they get all these guys back. I wouldn't be shocked if one of the guys in the secondary maybe isn't ready, like a Taylor Rapp. I know he took a pretty hard fall at trying to go for a play the other night. But, I mean, look, as long as you're getting those guys back on your defense, I feel good about your chances. Again, it's just you can't let Mahomes scramble around in the pocket and have too much time. You got it. The one thing the Bills did a really good job of in that game in Buffalo earlier this year, they applied the pressure and really made his life tough in the backfield where he got sacked a few times. But once you got that first hit on him, it was like, all right, you can go out there and actually do this.
Why can't Sean McDermott win on the road in the playoffs?
Well, how many teams end up actually winning at Arrowhead in the playoffs?
That's true.
I mean, the Bengals did, but
yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean,
is that like a mental block that you worry about in a game like this? The fact that he has not done it up to this point.
No, I haven't really worried about it all too much. And I mean, I know they've lost to those guys twice now at Arrowhead in the playoffs since McDermott took over. But no, I don't worry about it too much because I think with Josh under center, I feel good enough about them winning any game as long as he plays his best brand of football. The thing you can't do in this game, you can't turn the ball over, and you can't be giving the Chiefs extra yards. You can't have penalties in this game. And I know it's easier said than done because we just had this discussion yesterday. There are going to be penalties that go in the Chiefs' favor. I think I'm already accepting that for sure. But it's just about how do you respond to that and how do you make up for any shortcomings you might have when adversity strikes.
Yeah, again, the Chiefs trying to get their 3rd straight Super Bowl victory and would punch a ticket about beating the Bills on Sunday. Of course, the Bills trying to get back to the Super Bowl for the first time since the early 90s. The other game earlier on that day, by the way, that game will be at 6:30 on Sunday night, which you can watch on CBS. And then earlier on that day, you have the NFC Championship game with the Commanders and the Eagles. We'll dive into that game coming up next as we wrap up hour number 1 of the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you on your Friday here in the game. Tyler Head again, once again telling you about our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist. Of course, got plenty of snowfall around the Midlands earlier on this week. And as the sun has come out and things have warmed up, all that snow has been melting. And if you have an open crawl space under your home, some of that snow might have created some standing water underneath your home. High humidity and condensation in your crawl space can create things like mold and invite mildew and pest into that crawl space, which can cause all kinds of complications, including health issues for you and your family, because about half of the air that you breathe in your home comes from that crawl space. That's where our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist come in. Go online to schedule an appointment today at cantycanfixit.com. They'll send a professional out to your home to evaluate what's going on with your crawl space and your foundation and help you get it fixed right so you and your family can live comfortably without worry going forward. Again, go online to schedule an appointment today at cantycanfixit.com.
I've been asked early and often as the team got together, what's your identity? And that took some time to answer, as it should. But while we have found our identity, what I hit with the team is that we still haven't found our ceiling. And that fires me up to say that at this time of year. And that's really what we chase, about what we can do to get better and find our space to go for it again this weekend. And we've consistently raised the floor, but we haven't found that ceiling that we're going for. And that's kind of what the whole weeks are about, digging into the skills.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you here on your Friday on the Game. That was the head coach of the Washington Commanders, Dan Quinn, talking about his team not finding their ceiling just yet as they are getting set for the NFC Championship game, taking on the Eagles on Sunday. That game will be at 3 o'clock. By the way, you can listen to both conference championship games right here on the Game with pregame coverage starting for the NFC at 2, and then that game at 3, and then, of course, the AFC Championship game coming up at 6:30 as we find out who will punch their ticket to New Orleans to play in the Super Bowl. Washington is definitely the Cinderella story here, right? When you have as much turnover, ownership, head coach, quarterback in 1 year, nobody expects you to make the playoffs, let alone be in the conference championship game. But let me tell you, Washington's been one of the funnest teams to watch this entire year. Jaden Daniels is a superstar in the making and might just be the first rookie quarterback to go to the Super Bowl here in a couple of weeks.
Man, the Commanders are a blast to watch. They are a great team, and Dan Quinn has done a tremendous job. It's crazy what happens when you have good ownership that cares about winning and stuff, unlike the previous establishment. But, yeah, I mean, look, Washington is – They have been the surprise of the NFL this year. I don't know what the expectations really were for them heading into the year. Obviously, it wasn't this, but one game away from going to the Super Bowl. But you've got the Philadelphia Eagles in your way at Lincoln Financial.
And, of course, these two teams, divisional rivals in the NFC East, played twice this year, split the series, Eagles winning in early November, Commanders winning in late December. However, in that game, in late December, Jalen Hurts did get injured early in that game, so that was majority of a Kenny Pickett-led Philadelphia Eagles team that the Commanders did end up being. But familiarity does go a long way. And my question, first question is, can the Commanders stifle Saquon Barkley enough? And here's the thing. Barkley is obviously having a phenomenal season, and you're not just going to suddenly hold him to, let's say, 60 yards on the ground. But I go back to the game that they did win in late December. He had 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, and the Eagles still lost that game. Now, and he brought this up after the game, that the Washington was kind of selling out to stop the run because, again, when you got your backup quarterback in, you're going to lean on your superstar running back. Still, he went for $150 and 2 touchdowns, and they didn't win the game. So you don't have to completely shut him down. You just have to keep him from destroying you, it seems like.
You have to anticipate he's probably going to get 100 yards on the ground because you look at the last 2 games in the playoffs here. In that game against Green Bay, he went for 119 yards and no touchdowns, so kept out of the end zone, but Philly still won.
And he got over 100 late in that game.
Mm-hmm, that's right. And then against the Rams, I mean, he had 205 yards and 2 touchdowns. So and the thing is, he had over 25 carries in both games. So you have to anticipate he's getting the ball a ton, and you have to be able to try and stop him. Now, it's easier said than done. No one's really been able to do it as a 2,000-yard rusher this season. But the other thing is you got to also you got to be able to score in this game. If you're not scoring at least, I think around 30 points would be enough to win this game. Maybe a little bit higher, honestly. I think it's going to end up being a shootout, honestly. And you can't stop Saquon. We'll see if you could stop Jalen Hurts. I know he's a little banged up and stuff, but you got to try and do something here on offense.
Well, that's my other question is how healthy is Jalen Hurts? Because he had the concussion at the end of the regular season. And when you go back to that Green Bay game, they didn't really ask him to do a whole lot in that one. And then last week, he gets kind of twisted up like a pretzel on one of those tackles against the Rams. And throughout the entire game, by the way, got sacked 7 times. So I imagine he's feeling a little bit sore coming away from that one. But they didn't really ask him to do a whole lot against Saquon Barkley, went for over 200 yards. So again, if this is a one-dimensional offense and you can stifle Barkley enough, is Jalen Hurts capable of putting this offense on his back and leading them down the field for touchdown drives?
That's a big ask because, again, he's not going to be 100%. And so you wonder, like, how effective is he going to be as a passer in this game? I think, number one, you were, like, if you're Washington, you were able to really stifle Jared Goff, who looked much more like the L.A. Rams version of Goff when he wasn't at his best compared to the guy that has had a tremendous season for the Detroit Lions this year. And, you were able to win that game despite Detroit still scoring 31 points. So you got to be able to score in this game, but it is possible if you can win the turnover battle in this game. I think that's where you ultimately do win this game. I think Saquon is good enough to lead the Eagles to a victory, but it's not going to happen if the Eagles defense doesn't halt Jaden Daniels here.
And I'm intrigued to see, and I've been very impressed with Jaden Daniels on all accounts this year. How do you handle this environment? And look, he has not been stifled by anything. I think, they had the shot of him on the sideline this past weekend against the Lions, and then the game was still close at that point in time. Just looking cool and calm as collected. You wouldn't have known he was a rookie quarterback, starting his only second playoff game ever, a second of which is on the road. And that's the path that the Commanders are on, where they have no opportunity to play at home. They went to Tampa and won. They went to Detroit and won against a very rowdy fan base. And look, obviously, they play on the road at Philadelphia earlier on in the season. That game they lost back in early November, but this is going to be a different type of crowd with what's on the line and the chance to go back to a Super Bowl for the Eagles for the second time in 3 years. So how does Jaden Daniels handle that atmosphere, handle that environment? And I have a lot of confidence he's going to be able to, but it's certainly not going to be easy.
The good news for him is that, and this Commanders team in general, they've already gone on the road twice this postseason, and it's going to be that same way even if you get to New Orleans. That's basically a road game for you, too. But I think for Washington, we've seen Jaden handle it well. Like, the Lions game was the one that's like, okay, they were able to just strike quickly in that game and roll from there. Like, you were able to shut down the number 1 overall seed. I think the best team in football going into the divisional round last week. Like, I did not expect that at all.
Nothing. You took it away from them. You took the ball away from them 5 times on an offense that wasn't turning the ball over a whole lot.
And you were able to score 28 points in that second quarter. I mean, that's unbelievable stuff right there. So, look, if you get anywhere near that, you're going to win this game. But again, Philly is a different environment, especially in the playoffs. We'll see if it's going to snow or anything again. That obviously had an impact on the Rams and stuff. The good news for Jaden is he's also a good runner. And they have Brian Robinson in the backfield to where I feel good enough about the Commanders' run game to be able to try to win this game.
Quickly, you wanting Bills, Commanders?
I'm going Bills, Commanders this weekend. I think they're both going to win, and I'm liking the underdogs in these games.
I think that'd be a fun Super Bowl matchup. I know we just had Kansas City and Philadelphia a couple years ago. I'd like to see something.
Give us something new
and fresh. Yeah, so we'll break it down on Monday and see what happens there. That's hour number 1 of the Extra Point. Coming up in hour number 2, the ACC rethinking their conference championship game. I'll tell you about that next here on the Extra Point on the Game.
What's going on, guys? Are you tired of the freezing cold and ready for the Columbia heat to be back? Good news, it's starting to heat up a little bit next week. It'll get into the 60s next week, but still, it's going to be a little bit chilly, so that's why you should go to AAA. Here's some great news. You can buy a new unit today, and there's no payments or interest for 12 months. You can have pricing transparency with no hidden charges or fees. There's $1,500 buyback instant rebate. 15 years parts and labor transferable warranty, 0% interest for qualified buyers, and also there's guaranteed financing. So all good stuff right there. You can call AAA like I did at 803-677-1500. Again, that is 803-677-1500. And you can tell them that you heard about AAA on 107.5 The Game.
Welcome back in hour number 2 of the Extra Point. It's our head along with you here on the game. If you missed the breaking news, the beginning of the 9 o'clock hour, Coach Shane Beamer has gotten a restructure to his contract, an extension through the end of the 2030 season for South Carolina football. He'll get a bump in pay where this year he'll be making $8.1 million annually, and then that pay will increase by $100,000 every single year on January the 1st until he's making $8.6 by the final year of that contract in 2030. And kind of looking at the rough numbers of coaches around college football, that should, I believe, put Coach Beamer in the top 15 in terms of coach contracts. I believe he was 33rd this past year, making just a tick around just under $7 million, this past year. So, again, coming off the heels of another strong season with 9 wins, just missing out on 10 with Citrus Bowl there against Illinois. Coach Beamer gets a amendment on his contract to bump his pay up and extend through the 2030 season. We'll dive plenty more into this coming up at 11 as well with Wes and Chris, get their thoughts from the Gamecock Central perspective, of course. Speaking of college football, I thought this was interesting. Of course, the college football season wrapped up this past week with the inaugural 12-team playoff college football national championship, and of course Ohio State won. Congratulations to them. One of the perhaps most talented rosters in all of college football, getting the job done there with the win over Notre Dame. But even before the playoff wrapped up, we had already been talking plenty about, okay, what's going to change? What kind of tweaks can they make in 2025? What's going to be the format come 2026? And certainly, beyond that. And when you kind of look at what we talked about the other day, it doesn't seem like there's going to be too many tweaks being made this upcoming year. But in 2026, they can truly blow it up and start all over again. The SEC and the Big Ten will have a lot more power. And it's not just the 12-team playoff, or it's not just the playoff itself that could potentially be changing, but changes as well could be coming to conference championship games. And when you looked at the conference championship games this past year, they definitely felt like they diminished in importance to some degree, especially when we talked about the SEC and the Big Ten, because we knew going into the matchup in Atlanta that both the Georgia Bulldogs and the Texas Longhorns were going to be in the college football playoff. They were just fighting for the opportunity to have a bye. Same thing with Oregon and Penn State. We knew both those teams were going to be in the college football playoff. They were just fighting for a bye, which obviously the bye ended up hurting both those teams that won those conference championships, as they did not get the opportunity, or they did not themselves advance out of the quarterfinal round. And the debate comes up of, okay, is it worth playing an extra conference game where, you have the Ohio States, the Tennessees, teams like that are sitting idle in that week instead, and basically getting a bye earlier than what those conference champions end up getting. The ACC is exploring opportunities to reinvent their conference championship game. Now, we don't know when this is going to happen, but the discussions are being had. There's a meeting between, I believe, the presidents and the commissioner coming up here in a couple weeks in February, where they're really going to explore this idea. And Jim Phillips in Atlanta for the national championship game the other day did discuss with several reporters across major outlets about some of the ideas they had on the table. Now, we've seen these things floated out before, but this is the first time we've actually heard a conference commissioner say, yeah, we might be thinking about doing this. The first option, and we I guess couldn't even call it a conference championship at this point, would be to kind of turn the ACC championship game into a quasi play-in game. So his option would be that the team that has the best record in the ACC would sit idle that week. They would be determined the ACC champions, and instead you'd get teams 2 and 3 in the conference standings, because again, we don't have divisions anymore. We just take the win percentages and stack them up from, in the ACC's case, 1 to 17, and the top 2 teams this past year being SMU and Clemson got to play for the conference championship. In this instance, it would be teams number 2 and 3 playing for the conference championship, which this past year would have been Clemson and and Miami, as SMU had the overall best record in the ACC at the end of the regular season. And, of course, that means that, okay, the SMU team doesn't have to worry about losing. They're locked into the playoff by virtue of being the conference champion, and then you're having 2 and 3 play for the opportunity to essentially play their way in. Now, this also kind of plays into what is a potential proposed idea for the expanded playoff coming up here in a couple years in 2026. Potentially where it expands to either 14 or 16, where the thought process is that instead of just the automatic qualifiers being conference champions, all conferences get a certain amount of automatic qualifying spots that are filled in based on your conference standings. Now, again, we don't know what the exact number is going to be. It could be 3 teams, could be 4 teams. Of course, the SEC and the Big Ten are going to wield a lot of power here, but let's just theoretically say that it's a 3-3-2-2 type of model for the Power 4 conferences, where the SEC gets 3 teams in guaranteed. And you say 1, 2, 3 in your standings, you're in. The Big Ten, the same thing. 1, 2, 3 in your standings, you're in. And then the ACC and the Big 12, by virtue of being weaker power conferences, only get 2 teams in. So in this instance, let's just say we're going to use last year's standings as the kind of example here. You'd say, okay, SMU, by virtue of having the best record in the regular season, you're already locked in. You don't have to worry about playing in this conference championship game. But if you only have 1 more spot available, then you take Clemson and Miami as the 2 and 3 teams in your conference and say, you two go play each other, and we will see which team earns their right into being in the college football playoff. And I would imagine, personally, if this ends up being the model, if we do have multiple AQs, which, by the way, I am very much against. I am not a automatic qualifying fan at all when it comes to the college football playoff. I thought, for this past year, I would have much rather just taken teams 1 through 12 and allowed them in instead of saying, okay, well, yeah, Clemson's a conference champion, but they're 16, but they're going to jump in to being in just because they're automatically qualified by virtue of being conference champion, and then, we got to determine everything from there. I would rather just take teams 1 through 12, have playoff that way. If you want to give the top 4 seeds a bye, that's fine. Doesn't seem like that's the way we're going to go, but if we are going to go with multiple AQs per conference, I could see this end up being kind of the standard across the board. Because if you think about it, let's again go to the SEC here. By virtue of Georgia having the best, Texas having the best overall conference record this past year, what reason would you have them and Georgia playing each other if you know both those teams were going to be locked in? And let's just say theoretically, we're going to go with the 3 teams locked in approach. So, okay, Georgia and Texas, you're the top 2 teams in the SEC. You have nothing to play for by playing in Atlanta in the conference championship game. So instead, we're going to take Tennessee and Alabama as teams 3 and 4. They're going to play for the right to have that final automatic qualifying spot in the expanded 14 or 16 team playoff. Which again would make sense if that's the model that we end up going to. And it's important to remember, and Jim Phillips touched on this when talking to reporters the other day, the conference championship games aren't going anywhere. I know, again, coming back from this past year, we say, well, they don't really hold as much value anymore when both teams are going to be in, as opposed to having to play your way in through the conference championship games. The money these conference championship games make for the cities like Atlanta, like Charlotte, like Indianapolis, like Dallas, that's not going away. Those conferences and those cities are not going to surrender those things, so you do have to reinvent them a little bit. And I think going this route of saying, okay, well, if the model is multiple AQs, we're just going to take the 2 bottom teams to fight for that final spot. And again, there's still an opportunity to make at-large bids and all those kind of things, but for the most part, you're having a true play-in, which in a way expands the playoff out. So much like the play-in games for the NCAA tournament aren't actually a part of the bracket, they're still a part of your path to potentially playing for a national championship if you're in one of those first 4 games. You got to win that game to get yourself into the 64-team bracket. And I'd kind of look at this the same way when it comes to play-in. You wouldn't call them conference championships. I guess we'd call them conference play-in weekends or something along those lines. We'd have to come up with a new name for it. But that, to me, would make the most sense. Another kind of radical approach here that Jim Phillips also proposed is creating a mini bracket within your own conference where, according to him, in the last week of the regular season, you kind of leave that open to where you'd say teams, or the team first in the standings plays the team fourth in the standings, and the team third in the standings play the teams the second in the standings, and then the two winners end up playing conference championship weekend for the opportunity to lock up a spot in the playoffs. That seems that to me doesn't make as much sense, especially because you're restructuring scheduling like that, especially in today's world. Like, does that mean that South Carolina and Clemson wouldn't play the Saturday after Thanksgiving? Like, I don't know if you can abandon those things that easily. I get his way of thinking, but especially, again, as we think we're going to be expanding the AQs in the new college football playoff coming up in a couple years. Again, I don't see any value in having your top team play at all when it comes to your conference championship because, again, they're most likely just going to be locked in anyway. But again, it's outside the box thinking, and I appreciate that. And again, he's the first one to publicly come out and talk about this. But again, as we get more clarity on what the new era of the college football playoff is going to be, I imagine a lot of conferences are probably going to go this same route. Now, when you talk about the group of five, I imagine they're going to keep their conference championship games probably largely the same because if they still get a seat at the table and a guaranteed spot in the playoff with the highest ranked group of five champion, you obviously want to have a conference championship game to determine that. Now, it could be a case where there's no guarantee and it's truly just at-large bids and you have to hope to be high enough ranked for that. You'd want an extra data point for the theoretical Mountain West Conference champion, the AAC Conference champion, whoever it may be, to further prove to the committee that you deserve one of those spots if you don't have an automatic spot going up against ACC teams, SEC teams, Big 10, Big 12 teams that may be sitting idle that week instead. So, again, it's really early in the process. I expect little to no tweaks to the 12-team playoff in year number 2 in 2025, but 2026 is when things really can get crazy. And there's a trickle-down effect, unintended consequences to everything. And if you change the structure of how you get in the playoff, well, that means that conference championship games are probably going to follow suit as well. And again, when you talk about the stakes and the entertainment value of what those games would become as quasi-play-in games at that point in time, I mean, I don't hate it. Again, I don't love AQs, but if that's what you're going to give me, then that's fine. And the drama and intensity of knowing that one of those teams is going to be sitting at home during the playoffs and one of those teams is going to be in, like, I'd sign up for that. Tennessee and Alabama having a rematch to determine which of those teams is going to make the college football playoff, I think that'd be pretty cool. And again, we'll see what other conferences decide to kind of follow suit on this. But I do think Jim Phillips is maybe leading the curve in this being the ideal way for conference championship weekend to go, with the lessened value of it being the traditional sense with the playoff potentially expanding going forward. So we'll see what happens. Just thought it was intriguing that he did put that out there the other day. Of course, big matchup coming up later on this afternoon, women's basketball, as they get set to take on LSU. Pregame coverage starting at 4:30 for a 5 o'clock tip. Unfortunately, College Game Day not going to be in town as the game did have to get rescheduled from last night. We'll check out with our guy, Joe Machika from the Big Spur. Talk all things women's basketball coming up next here on your Friday on the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyrant along with you here on your Friday on The Game. As I mentioned, huge matchup tonight. Top 5 South Carolina women playing host to Kim Mulkey and the LSU Tigers. We'll get into plenty of that. As always, with our guy, Joe Machika from the Big Spur. But, Joe, of course, I have to give respect to your Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Valiant effort on Monday night. Did come up a little bit short on getting that national championship, though. I know you probably had quite a range of emotions watching that game over the course of 3 hours.
Yeah, most certainly, Tyler. I've always said that Riley Leonard wasn't a good enough quarterback to get Notre Dame over the hump for a national championship, but, just happy they were there. And happy I was privileged enough to be able to go to the first ever, playoff game at a home site back home in South Bend. So it was a fun little ride, and, hate to lose one to Ohio State, but the Irish are going to be back next year. We'll see what happens with Marcus Freeman era.
Where was your belief when they cut the lead to 8 points late in that game? Like
0.
Can they pull this off?
Yeah, I don't know. I had always thought the matchup between Jeremiah Smith and Christian Gray was a very, very, very big glaring mismatch, because you have Julio Jones essentially on Christian Gray, a freshman cornerback who's still trying to make a name for himself. And I'm not discrediting Christian Gray. I think he might be like an all-pro someday, or at least make an NFL roster for certain. But he's not Jeremiah Smith, right? So I knew that was going to get exploited, and it's just when you put $20 million down to put together a roster like Ryan Day and Ohio State, that you better win, right? So it's good for the brand, certainly, to be on that stage. And I enjoyed this playoff, Tyler. I don't know about you, but I thoroughly enjoyed the 12-team playoff, the campus sites, everything about it was great.
Yeah. Not all the games were necessarily competitive, which I think a lot of us maybe want to see improved on next year, but nevertheless a fun set of games, especially to wrap things up, and obviously national championship with Ohio State. But of course, we turn our attention to tonight at Colonial Life Arena with South Carolina playing host to LSU. Of course, this game is supposed to take place last night. Weather out there in LSU, obviously, or in Louisiana, delayed things. Day later, 5 o'clock today instead. 4:30 pregame starting here on 107.5 Game. We'll get into the specifics in a moment, but this is kind of the premier rivalry, I feel like, in women's college basketball now, predicated a lot on obviously the success of both programs, but particularly the clash of personalities with the head coaches. Like, everybody knows Dawn Staley, everybody knows Kim Mulkey, two very polar opposites in the way that they conduct themselves and the things they talk about and say in the media, but nobody can deny these are two of the best women's basketball coaches, best basketball coaches in general in the college game right now.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. This is a pretty big tilt tonight at Colonial Life. It's unfortunate that College Game Day, or it got moved to Friday, and College Game Day got taken off the game. That would have just helped even more so with the hype of this game and everything. But yeah, it really is a clash of two titans, right? Two of the best coaches in the game of basketball, bringing their programs to which they've been at for years, built the dynasties up to where it's at. Clashing at Colonial Life. It's going to be some theater, Tyler. It really is. I think it's going to be some really good basketball. LSU bringing in two really talented players, Naismith Player of the Year nominees in Flau'jae Johnson and Anisha Morrow. So there's the star power is all over the floor. South Carolina possesses a lot of star power, goes well into their bench and rotation. So I think this is going to be a game, Tyler, that you certainly aren't going to want to miss. It's going to be close, a lot closer than I think a lot of South Carolina's SEC games have gone. But again, I think it helps South Carolina because it's at CLA, right? You played out LSU last year, and that game got a little bit out of hand. But the fact that it's in front of your home fans should certainly excite you, and you've got a chance to make the atmosphere a good one against Kim Mulkey and this LSU team.
And again, the eyes of the nation going to be upon you, for this matchup. And the thing that's intriguing anytime these two teams get together, because again, LSU brought in Kim Mulkey from Baylor, really for the specific purpose of getting LSU over the South Carolina hump. And yes, they won the national championship a couple years ago, but that wasn't going through South Carolina. Carolina won the matchup with them earlier on that season. And, of course, Iowa beat South Carolina for getting the opportunity to play in that national championship game. So even with the success that Kim Mulkey has had so far at LSU, the constant thing in her ear is, well, you haven't beaten Dawn Staley yet. LSU's not beaten South Carolina in 16 straight games. So even some people question this being a rivalry because LSU has not won their end of it yet on the certainly on the Kim Mulkey side. So this is a game that Kim Mulkey can finally, if they win, prove to everyone, hey, I can finally beat Dawn Staley here at LSU.
Yeah, most certainly, Tyler. There's a lot more to play for down in the Bayou than there is up at South Carolina, right? This is South Carolina's 9th ranked game of the year. It comes in a spree of 5 in conference play, and the entire month of January was ranked for this South Carolina team. So, there's experience in ranked games. LSU enters the game undefeated, right? They've won 2 ranked games, so they've got some experience in it. Not to say that they haven't really played anybody of quality yet, but this is going to be the best team that they've played all year. So I think it's going to be really good basketball. South Carolina's been playing really, really, really good basketball against really, really good teams. So, I think the lean goes to South Carolina simply because it's at Colonial Life. But, Mulkey's in LSU has a lot more to play for down there in the Bayou.
I think the most important question is, what is Kim Mulkey going to be wearing in this game? We know she brings some pretty outlandish fits. I saw the thing a couple weeks ago, I forget who they were playing, but she was essentially wearing like a basketball net around her waist and some kind of dress skirt combination. My guess, here's my guess. Given the fact that the snow and everything happened this week, I'm going to go with like Yeti or Abominable Snowman, something that kind of leans in to the wintry weather aspect of this. That's my guess for tonight.
Nice big fur for Kim Mulkey on the sidelines.
Yes.
I could see it. In terms of Dawn, Kim Mulkey's going to dress outlandish regardless. But Dawn has really kind of toned it back. They're asking fans to wear garnet. Mm-hmm. So the coaching staff has had these like really dope Carolina like knit sweaters that I could see them, in some garnet sweaters. But I don't know. It's certainly Dawn's fit is certainly not going to be as loud as Mulkey. She might have to throw on some Balenciaga to keep up, but we'll see. I don't know. We'll have to see. I could definitely see a fur though with the cold and whatnot.
Well, I think with Dawn, it's important to remember. Typically, they're playing on Sundays, and when they do play on Sundays, she'll rock an Eagle fit, a Randall Cunningham jersey, or something along those lines to support her Birds. They're not playing this Sunday. Their next game will be Monday night, taking on Tennessee. So if she wants to get the Eagles support out of the way, she's going to need to do this on Friday. So I don't know, maybe a McNabb jersey, maybe an Alshon Jeffrey or something along those lines, rocking it on the baseline tonight.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I can see some Eagles stuff, and then I could also see her waiting till Monday for the Eagles game. Take some Philadelphia up there to Rocky Top. That'd be a pretty good road trip. But yeah, we'll see. The fits, I love it. It just continues to add to this rivalry too. It's like, what are the coaches going to wear? Like what's going to go down? Like, it's women's basketball to a T. So you got 2 of the best teams in the country coming into Colonial Life tonight, and it's going to be theater, Tyler. It really is.
Yeah, and again, there's a reason why College Game Day was originally going to be here for this matchup yesterday if it took place originally scheduled, because this draws in a lot of eyes. And, it's because of the coaches in a lot of ways. With the past couple of years, you've obviously had some pretty big personalities in this matchup. You had, you had Angel Reese, Aaliyah Boston. You obviously had the physical presence of Camila Cardoso a season ago. And I think the brawl, so to speak, that took place in the SEC tournament took this game from a national standpoint to a different level, where the casual viewer is going to be flipping channels tonight saying, oh, wow, South Carolina and LSU are playing women's basketball, top 5 matchup. Yeah, let me check that out because I don't know what's going to take place. Now, obviously, we hope we don't have some kind of melee like what happened out in Greenville, but certainly there's always the opportunity for things to get heated when these 2 teams square off.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. LSU returning a lot of players as well. So it's not the same mix of players and that got a little physical in Greenville. So and Dawn talked about it in her presser yesterday. She's like, we know that they're going to officiate this game differently because they know like you don't want what happened last time to happen, right? And they're going to do their best to prevent that, and rightfully so. You want a good, clean basketball game here, and I think you're going to get one, right? This game is going to be pretty high scoring. South Carolina's defense has been holding teams, especially in the SEC, down to like 60-something points. I can see LSU getting up to 70, 80, just depending on, how efficiently they're scoring. And, the way that South Carolina's been playing on offense, it doesn't put it past me to go score 90, 80, 90, 100 points. Because, they scored 101 against the 13th ranked team in the country this past weekend. So it doesn't. I wouldn't really put it past me that South Carolina scores a lot of points.
Getting to be a big matchup tonight. Pregame coverage starting at 4:30, 5 o'clock tip right here on 107.5 The Game. We'll dive into some more of the specifics of this matchup. Let's hear what Don Staley did have to say when talking to the media yesterday. Coming up next, it is the Extra Point. Tyler Head, along with you, Joe Machica from the Big Spur, joining me as he does each and every Friday here on The Game.
it's our defense. It's our willingness to get stops. Our willingness is to disrupt. Our willingness to not give teams what they want to do best. LSU wants to play in transition. LSU wants to execute in ball screen offense and they want to execute winning the battle of the boards. So, if we take care of those three things, I think it puts us in a really good place.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you, talking to our guy, Joe Machica from thebigspur.com ahead of tonight's matchup between South Carolina and LSU. Top 5 showdown in women's basketball over at Colonial Life Arena. That was Dawn Staley yesterday, talking to the media about how much of a challenge it's going to be slowing down this LSU offense, which is third in the nation in points per game at 90.6. But Joe, you kind of alluded to it a moment ago with how battle-tested Dawn Staley's crew's been, going up against tons and tons of high-level offenses, most recently against Texas the other week, where they completely stifled them and held them to one of their worst season totals of the entire year in terms of points per game scored. No reason to think they can't do the same thing against this talented LSU team, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. Just the way that they've been playing offensively has been ridiculous. They've made like half their shots since they've lost to UCLA. It's been really close. They've been shooting at least or close to 50%. If they're not shooting 50% in the game, it's like 48, 49%. So they've been making a lot of shots, number one. But Tyler, this team, I mean, to borrow a line from Kurt Signetti, right? They don't just beat ranked teams. They beat the crap out of them. They really do. Like this offense plays together unbelievably well. Like I think this might be one of the most tight-knit teams we've ever seen in the Staley era here. And so just offensively, like there's so much coming at you from a South Carolina standpoint. Like Miriam Dowda, the third big off the bench, can shoot threes, right? There's so much you have to prep for that I would think that South Carolina's offense is going to run away with this. And then, I mean, you had the quote at the top of the segment here about this defense. This defense has been legit, man, allowing near 60 points to just about every SEC opponent that they faced. They've been really good on the defensive end. And again, listening to Sanaya Fagan talk about it after the game last week against Oklahoma, she's like, yeah, I mean, all defense is really to us, it's just, stay and help side, be ready to help somebody out if they get beat and be ready to rotate. Plain and simple, man-to-man, just be there for your teammate. I think it's great. And, again, helps to tighten it. And this team gel together.
When it comes to South Carolina's defense, they're going to have to account for one of the best players in all of the country in Anissa Morrow on the other side for LSU. Here's Dawn Staley yesterday talking about the challenge they're going to have in slowing down Morrow.
I mean, you really can't stop her. It is what she does. I think you have to find ways in which to make it hard for her to score. That's one, and then you got to gang rebound. You got to gang box out. It's about will and positioning, and hopefully, making her play on the other side of the ball. Like she can't just do what she does best, and is able to rest on the defensive side of the ball. So we got to make her play on both ends, and we got enough bigs that will give her different looks to make her play.
And she is a great scorer, averaging 18.7 points per game. But as Dawn Staley alluded to, the rebounds are where she really shines. The national leader in rebounding at 14.2 per game. But here's what stands out to me when I look at her. She's only 6'1". And again, from a skill standpoint, you can best a lot of teams off the boards just by having the abilities. But when it comes to size, in a game like this, I feel like her being a little bit on the shorter side at only 6'1" is something, especially when you talk about going up against like Chloe Kitts and girls like that I don't think will be maybe as dominant of a presence tonight for Anissa Morrow.
Yeah, most certainly, Tyler. I agree. This game, I'm looking at the post presence for South Carolina. I'm looking at Chloe Kitts, Joyce Edwards, and Sanaya Fagan, right? Joyce Edwards, Dawn told me, a couple weeks ago after Texas, that Joyce Edwards, in the absence of Ashlyn Watkins, has really elevated her play without, Dawn really having to ask her to. So I think that's huge. Joyce Edwards, the true freshman, continues to make a name for herself. But then Chloe Kitts has stepped up realistically. So she's listed as a junior, but she enrolled early in January.
Yep.
So technically she's a sophomore, playing up and above, her class grade for sure. And then you've got Sanaya Fagan, who a different element of her game has been unlocked without Ashlyn Watkins. She's been trusted to do a little bit more. And now remember, Tyler, like all of these players on this roster have been the star player before. whether that be in high school, whether that be at one point for South Carolina, right? So Sanaya Fagan has been able to unlock, that extra element of her game that, maybe she hasn't, had to use since high school or since she's gotten here, because she hasn't really been called upon to make all these plays. But she's a different breed since Ashland went down, and that injury has really propelled this team to do what they have, and they've been blowing out really, really good teams. And I mean, tonight I don't see why tonight's going to be any different.
The one thing that stands out to me here, and again, Carolina's played tons of great offensive teams, both in conference and out of conference, back in November and December. This is the only team in the SEC that has 3 scorers averaging over 15 points per game. And South Carolina has not gone up against a team from a power conference with 3 scorers averaging over 15 a game, with Anisha Morrow at 18.7 points per game, Flau'jae Johnson averaging 20, then Michaela Williams averaging 16.5 herself. So it's not just taking away one of these players. They've got multiple girls on the court that can hurt you with the way that they can score. And again, as good as South Carolina's defense is, that is going to be a challenge trying to wrangle all 3 of those in over the course of the game tonight.
Yeah. Absolutely, Tyler. If you look across the aisle, South Carolina's scoring is ridiculous. But I mean, defensively, when LSU brings that much firepower into this game, like, those gals play a lot. It's not like the rotations that Dawn Staley has that are quick, kind of almost hockey shifts, in minutes and stuff like that. So like, there's Kim Mulkey-Stars will play a lot. So you're going to need a variety of different defenders. I was talking to Brad Muller on my show about it. And he's like, you're going to see a bunch of different, primaries and a secondary with the rotations that South Carolina has. But, I think offense or defensively for South Carolina, you're going to have to limit them. Like, let Anisha Morrow and Flau'jae score what they need, but you're going to have to limit the rest of the team, right? I think that's your depth is what comes in handy here, because LSU certainly doesn't have as much as South Carolina does, and that's what's been winning them games as of late.
And unlike what you're going to face against Tennessee on Monday night, which that's going to be in and of itself an own challenging matchup, LSU doesn't kill it from the outside. They're actually very similar to Texas, as they are 14th in three-pointers made and only 15th in attempts. So if you can really lock down things by the basket, they're going to have a really tough time scoring on you, because they're just not made or built to beat you from the outside.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. And again, to win the post play, you just got to be disciplined, right? Like I was saying with Sanaya Fagan, stepping up, help side, being there, being ready to collapse, especially on the better players. Especially like when Flau'jae gets a drive, be ready to collapse. Be ready to collapse on Anisha Morrow. Make it hard for them to get buckets at the paint. It's defend your home floor is what it's really going to come down to. Like, the tougher team is going to win this game. And, to South Carolina's benefit, it's at CLA. You've got the best fans in the country behind you. So, again, I think it's just going to be a toughness battle down low. And, even though we talked about the officiating being different, I still expect to get a little chippy in the post play, most certainly where that will be.
I was going to say, again, hopefully we don't have some kind of melee here, but when you have the stakes of this game and the intensity of, can we call it a rivalry when LSU's not won in the past 16 matchups and Kim Mulkey's not beaten South Carolina since she's been at LSU? Regardless, it's probably going to be chippy. There may be a couple of extra fouls in there, and like Dawn Staley alluded to yesterday, they're probably going to be pretty quick with the whistle to make sure it doesn't get out of hand.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that's all it takes is being quick with the whistle, right? These players know what stage they're on. They know it's on ESPN. They know everyone is watching. So when the lights are the brightest, you have to bring that extra competitive edge. And, I think this game is going to be chippy, yeah. But again, I don't know if you can really call it a rivalry with Mulkey's history. And Tyler, I'm going to be honest, I don't see LSU picking up a win tonight. The way that South Carolina has been playing. Now they got to start. They can't start slow. But they also, even if they don't start fast, I still think they take this one. But yeah, like, it's the fact that it's at Colonial Life, and this team, sure, they're not as juiced to play this one because it got delayed a day. But I don't know. The way that Carolina has been playing, it might be a little bit closer. Again, as I mentioned, I think with Anisha Morrow and Flau'jae, you could see them scoring, into the 70s. But again, the South Carolina team has been so dominant as of late, and I just don't think LSU has the depth to catch up. But we'll see, Tyler. It's going to be some theater, man.
Yeah, going to be a fun one again tonight. Tip off at 5 o'clock. Pregame coverage starting here at 4:30. And, man, just enjoying this journey of the season so far. And hopefully when we talk again a week from now, we're still talking about an undefeated South Carolina crew.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I can definitely, see them going up to Rocky Top, taking a victory up there. And, again, being undefeated in SEC play and making it through this whole month of January unscathed is pretty impressive. Your entire month of January was ranked. And to be able to do what you've done already, and then if you can cap it off with 2 wins over the premier programs in women's college basketball, it's pretty impressive stuff, Tyler. Hope to be talking to you about it next week.
Absolutely. Appreciate it as always, Joe.
Yeah, Tyler, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Here's Joe Machika from thebigspur.com. Again, big matchup tonight with South Carolina and LSU. We'll come back, wrap up today's edition of the X Point. Breaking news in the NFL. Who just hired a new head coach? I'll tell you about that coming up next. It is the X Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Friday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the X Point. Tyler Head along with you here on your Friday on The Game. We'll get to breaking news in the NFL in just a moment, but do you ever get blindsided by something and then completely forget to do something that you were completely intending to do? Well, that's happened to me this morning. I'm going to blame Jack on this, in a kidding way, of course. When we started the show at 9 o'clock, he brought up the breaking news of Coach Beamer and his amendment to his contract, which got him a raise and an extension through 2030. And I'll tell you, I admit it, I completely forgot to do something we have to do each and every morning. And that's our Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up.
Time to get hyped.
Here's your 9 a.m. Sandstorm.
Sponsored by George Sink Injury Lawyers. Just call all nines.
Better late than never. It is time for your 9 a.m. Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up, brought to you by South Carolina's largest injury law firm, George Sink Injury Lawyers. If you've been hurt in the car or at work, call George Sink now at 803-ALL-9s. Again, I blame Jack. He blindsided me with news, and I had it on the rundown, but better late than never, as I always say. Big news in the NFL as the coaching carousel continues to spin. Just about 15 minutes ago, Adam Schefter reporting the Las Vegas Raiders have reached an agreement with Pete Carroll to become the new head coach of their team, a 3-year deal with a 4th-year team option. And there were a lot of candidates on the board for the Las Vegas Raiders. Of course, Josh McDaniels being fired last year, and then Antonio Pierce taking over and leading the team this past season. And, of course, the wheels really kind of fell off there, and they weren't in the best position to succeed. But Pete Carroll, who did not seem to want to stop coaching in Seattle. Remember, a year ago, what went down there with him being moved into a advisory type of role within the organization that he seemed, reluctant to in his press conferences. He was stepping away from being a head coach. It was very clear he still had the itch to want to continue to be a head coach, even though the Seahawks had not had as much success in the past couple of years. Again, you go back a decade, and he's got the best team in the NFL, the Legion of Boom. They're winning the Super Bowl. They're going back to another Super Bowl the year after that. But since 2000 and really since they lost that Super Bowl 10 years ago, they'd not gotten out of the divisional round. In the past couple of years, they had not even made it past the wild card round. So the Seahawks decided they were going to make a change. They obviously hired Mike McDonald from the Baltimore Ravens and moved Pete Carroll over into that advisory type of role within the organization that, again, he didn't really seem to have much of an interest in. But the Las Vegas Raiders needing somebody that can really get that culture back on track, go out and hire a guy that, again, has a great track record at both the pro and the college level. The question does come up of, okay, he's 73 years old at this point in time, and by the time week 3 rolls around of the NFL season, he'll be 74 years of age. But, when you think about guys that don't look their age, Pete Carroll's one of those guys. I mean, he's got the energy of a 25-year-old on the sidelines chewing gum and running up and down and all those kind of things. So I don't think age is a real problem here. And, again, this is a 3-year deal. And if anything, it hopefully for the Raiders gets the organization back on track. Because, again, they've been a mess of a franchise for a while now. And a lot of that does have to do with the ownership of Mark Davis and his stupid haircut. You obviously bring in a guy like Tom Brady as a minority owner at this point in time to hopefully help establish a winning culture. And again, just because you're a great player doesn't mean you're going to be a great executive and a great owner with these teams. But Tom Brady seemingly had a big hand in the hiring process or the interviews that were going on. And I could see Tom Brady really liking a Pete Carroll as a head coach. Again, those guys had plenty of clashes, on the field, including in that Super Bowl where Pete Carroll chose not to run the ball. And we know famously how that ended up working out with Malcolm Butler getting the interception and helping the Patriots win that Super Bowl back about, really was, yeah, exactly 10 years ago now, funny enough. But Pete Carroll getting back in the coaching ranks, again, we'll see that they don't have an abundance of resources at this point in time. The quarterback situation is not great. We'll see what Pete Carroll can do if he can work his magic out there in Las Vegas. And again, it's an uphill challenge in that division as well, because you're coming in already with the Chiefs there. who are doing their thing and could be talking about a third straight Super Bowl here in a couple weeks. You have the Chargers with Jim Harbaugh that are on the rise. The Broncos just made it back to the playoffs with Sean Payton as their head coach. Really, this is kind of the one of the hires that makes the most sense, because you have an established veteran head coach that's proven the ability to win, get to Super Bowls, and win Super Bowls, because you're going into really a murderer's row of opposing head coaches within your own division that you're going to have to beat. So if you go out there and hire a hotshot coordinator that's never been proven as a head coach, they could chew him up and spit him out really quickly, especially if you don't have the resources to compete right away. But Pete Carroll seems like a hire that can potentially get the Raiders back to being competitive in what is potentially one of the, if not the toughest divisions in all of the NFL. So that's news in the morning again, that coming out about 15, 20 minutes ago per Adam Schefter and multiple other outlets reporting on it, as Pete Carroll will now go be the head coach out at Las Vegas, coaching under Tom Brady now as, again, one of the owners, and see if he can get the much maligned Raiders organization back on track to what they were many, many years ago in their heyday. That'll do it for today's edition of The Extra Point. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. We'll jump back in to the Coach Beamer contract conversation, as also continue to talk about the matchup tonight with South Carolina women's basketball playing host to number 5 LSU here on your Friday on The Game.